right, hi everybody. So it's good to see so many people here. Yay. And to add more detail and more basic background knowledge and awareness to your debating, we have today Professor Shaun Odwyer. He's a philosophy major and also a associate professor in Kyushu University's Faculty of Languages and Cultures, together with Professor Inoue, and also worked with Professor Danger. Yes, yeah, it's okay, excellent. So his topic today is about vegetarianism and its effect on the planet, which is certainly an important topic these days. I think it integrates pretty well with what we talked about last time about sustainability. I hope you enjoy the lecture and then get some valuable information you can use for your debates. Thank you, Professor Odwyer.
Oh, good afternoon.
Good morning. Good morning.
Right. That was a great start. Still haven't quite working on it yet. Okay, well, what I've got here is a possible debate proposition for you to consider. Though, of course, it's up to you how you will decide to use that. So, to reduce habitat destruction and global warming, governments should encourage more citizens to become vegetarians or vegans. Now, I'm not necessarily saying which governments, Japanese or Korean government, for example. And I'm not saying everyone, just more people. So, as I talk about this, we can think about the positive and negative effects of such a policy proposal. Well, yesterday, did you have a good talk with Professor Painter about Sustainable Development Goals? Alright, so you know what they all are? You remember what they all are? Let's try and yeah. Because actually I might forget. Try and keep them in mind as we just go through a couple of pictures. Well, first of all, some photos of particularly vulnerable people. In the left-hand photograph, a Venezuelan woman, working class, not wealthy, with a very young child. She has not had enough food. She cannot breastfeed her baby. On the right, Dalit children in India, again, not getting enough food. Which SDG or Sustainable Development Goal does this match with? No poverty, yeah, number one, and zero hunger.
And also, I think, isn't there something about encouraging, like, health itself?
Yes, health.
Health 11, or I don't remember the numbers.
Yes. So perhaps we can focus most on zero hunger. We can think about the others as well. Okay, so the aspiration, I guess, or the hope is that by 2030 we will realize all of the Sustainable Development Goals. That there will be zero hunger. That there will be no poverty. That there will be much improved health. But what do these people need? What do they need to have to get to the stage where there is zero hunger? Well, they are very hungry, of course. Well, here we have two dinners. On the left, a meal with, I think, rice, vegetables, roast beef, a glass of milk. Sorry, on the left, on the left. On the right, a plate of kidney beans and green beans. So think about which one of these, which one will be better for people who lack nutrition, who are malnourished? Hands up if you think the left one. Right, hands up if you think the right one. Yeah. Some of you think the right one. Okay. Let's just think about these two here. this one and this one. Okay, these are important, we know. Beef has protein, good quality protein, complete complement of amino acids, easily digested, quickly digested in a convenient package. 100 grams, 20 grams of protein, high quality. Has iron, vitamin B12, calcium in the beef and in the milk. Very important for young children. Very important for a nursing mother with a baby. On the right, well, we might have some protein, maybe about 4 grams, 100 gram serving of beans. Not complete. Needs to be mixed with grain or rice to have full amino acids. May not or probably does not have enough iron or calcium or B12. So, it seems like we need to increase production of high protein, high quality foods, people like that, and get it to them. But we've only been thinking of maybe 3 sustainable development goals. Zero hunger, reduce poverty, improve health. There are, however, some others we need to think about. Well, which SDGs match these images? This one here, 50,000 years of human progress, from low impact to high impact technology, agriculture, land use. Which one does that match with?
Infrastructure.
Yeah, it's a good point actually. It does look like it, doesn't it? God, that right side is
the one I
packed
would
with
guess.
infrastructure. Yeah.
Sustainable communities, it really looks like
Think
how-
about what it's based on, what it's on, and how. Sorry?
Life on Earth.
Life on Earth, yes.
Maybe because there's a set of 3, it's like land, water, and air.
Yeah, it does
You
look
were
like it,
thinking
doesn't
about
it? Yeah, I had to sort of pack everything into one slide. So here we can see taking up land space, using it, crowding out other species, reducing biodiversity.
That one too.
This one, okay, this is a bit easier, maybe. What's this one? Life underwater. And here we can actually see technology and progress. Very small scale fishing, huge scale fishing, netting up huge numbers of fish. And eventually, I don't know what this is way in the future. Energy extraction from the ocean. And this one, what's this? Partly, look at these
Global
two.
warming.
Global warming. Okay, so what is that, which SDG does that connect to? So our hope is, probably Andy Painter has talked about this yesterday, is it too much of a hope, that we can get all of these sustainable development goals realised by 2030. But what if they don't match up? What if all of them don't match up? What if in fact they are incommensurable, some of them, which means we can't quite rank them as equal, but it's equally difficult to say one is more important than the other. We're kind of stuck. The fact of the matter is that global meat and animal protein consumption has been rising very, very fast. China has been rapidly becoming an industrialized nation with industrialized incomes. People with industrialized incomes have expectations or hopes. They hope to have a better diet, they hope to have better jobs, cars and so on. So meat consumption in China has vastly increased in the past 30 or 40 years. And in countries like the United States, it remains very, very high in developed countries. So here's our problem. There is a connection, which I'm going to explain to you, between high animal protein consumption biodiversity loss and global warming. What are we going to do to address these problems? So according to a study sponsored by The Lancet, to cope with a global population which could rise to 7.7 billion in 2030 and 10 billion in 2050, we, and especially we in rich countries, are really going to have to change our diets. So to give you an example, according to the Lancet study, people in the United States will have to decrease their meat consumption by between 100 and 90% per day. A huge change. So, what is our choice? Try and meet all the Sustainable Development Goals, or are there some foods we're going to have to give up, especially we rich people? That's our question. Okay, so today's lecture. First, how are high rates of animal protein consumption connected to climate change and biodiversity loss? 2, what can we do to reduce our dependence on animal protein? How can we bring down how much meat, fish, chicken, seafood, dairy products, cheese, milk? How can we reduce that? Or what policy proposals can help us to do that? Now, some possible disadvantages in reducing meat eating or going vegetarian vegan. There are some very important possible disadvantages which could endanger some Sustainable Development Goals. In conclusion, alright, well, it's true to say, obviously, that we rely on animal products a lot. Not only for food, also for clothing. They're in everything almost that we eat. Now, as a vegetarian, in Japan and also visiting South Korea sometimes, I am forced to realize this. Particularly because vegetarian is not so popular in either country. So, for example, in dishes like kimchi, there will be fish or seafood products, which is one reason why I don't really eat kimchi. I like kimchi, mostly, but only if it's fit for vegetarians. In dishes like udon or soba, there is dashi, which I don't eat. So animal products are in everything. Starbucks, coffees, and frappuccinos, of course. There's dairy, there's milk, and so on. So, while you may have heard of vegetarianism and veganism and thought, wow, these guys are kind of weird. What's their problem? They think it's cruel? Well, life is cruel. But the argument I'm talking about today is much more serious, and perhaps much more scary. And it's to say that, well, there may be a strong connection. Not a very strong connection, but a strong connection between increasing consumption of animal protein, increased global warming, extreme weather disasters, rising oceans, biodiversity collapse on land and in the sea. That's what I want you to think about. Now, first of all, I hope this is clear to you. I'm not going to say on the pro side that if you go vegetarian or vegan, you're going to save the world while you're still driving your car or taking frequent overseas trips. That's not how it works. The biggest producer of greenhouse gases is, of course, fossil fuels. It is. Fossil fuels we use to generate our power. Fossil fuels used in motor transport. Fossil fuels used for aircraft when we fly internationally, and so on and so on. This is the biggest issue. Animal agriculture, or livestock agriculture, counts for perhaps at least 13%. some of it or quite a lot of it is associated or connected with cattle farming. Cows, like most other living things, fart. They do. But in this case, cows methane. Cows produce a lot of methane when they fart. This is helping to drive greenhouse gas production. There are other issues. Waste disposal. Well, livestock shit a lot. That has to be dealt with too. Energy has to be used in dealing with that. Manure management, food for those animals. It all adds up. That's not the only problem though. So if we look at the thing, 13%, well, it's not so important. There are other issues. One of them is that farms take up space. So here we have a photo from Brazil. One taken in 1975, one taken in 2009. Heavily forested part of Brazil. The land, over a period of about 40 years, was cleared for farms. So we're seeing a lot of forests cut down to create space and land for cattle farms especially. And this has a number of problems. One is that deforestation, cutting down forests to create farmland, contributes about 10% of global warming. That's problem number one. And two, it is taking important trees out of the environment which help regulate, help limit the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. And secondly, many things live in forests. Plants, animals, insects, birds. They lose their living space, they get wiped out. Biodiversity collapses, or is lost. Now, this all looks pretty bad news for people who eat a lot of red meat, especially beef. And maybe if you're Japanese or Korean, you'll be thinking, well, I don't really eat that much meat. I eat mostly fish and seafood. Sorry, guys. Bad news for you. Oops. Let's think about life below water, Sustainable Development Goal number 14. Well, it's true, Japan and Korea don't eat so much beef and dairy, but they do consume a lot of fish and seafood. So I think Japan in 2010 consumed about 10% of the world's global fish catch. South Korea, relative to its population, was the world's biggest consumer of seafood and fish in 2016. China has an even bigger appetite for seafood and fish. So probably exceeding 65 billion tons per year, far exceeding other countries. So what problems is this creating? To get all that fish and seafood, we need industrial scale shipping with gigantic nets. And there are a few problems this generates. One, particular species which are popular for food, such as bluefin tuna, are getting wiped out. It may taste good, but there's not enough of it to go around. Problem number one, we are wiping out individual species. Two, the methods that are used for fishing catch a lot of other fish and animals by accident. Well, not by accident, no one cares, but they get caught up. Millions of them. Sharks, fish that no one wants to eat, turtles, whales, dolphins, birds. Some of them endangered, some of them not. Every year this is happening. Quite often it's illegal, but every year this is happening, biodiversity is being lost. So yeah, this is a problem with bycatch, which means accidental catch. So there's no doubt that increasing global consumption of animal protein, and it is increasing, it's not decreasing, it's increasing, is putting pressure in many different ways, on biodiversity and on production of greenhouse gases, which is contributing, along with fossil fuel use, to extreme weather, climate change. So what can be done to reduce our dependence on animal protein? Well, a commission of 30 scientists associated with the Eat Lancet project, Lancet is the world's leading medical journal, released a report calling for huge changes in human diets. So as I said, in countries like the United States, daily meat protein consumption would have to drop to about 14 grams a day. So really, you would be eating one hamburger a week, or 150 gram steak once a week, and that's it, finished. There's going to be a lot of unhappy Americans, especially. And Australia, I'm Australian, I would know a lot of unhappy Australians if this is true. Consumption of grains, fruits, vegetables, nuts, legumes, beans would have to increase by 35%. People would have to depend more and more on vegetable foods for their protein. Now, governments cannot force you or tell you that you must become vegetarian or vegan, or maybe a flexitarian, even. They can't force you. If they do, you are going to vote, and you're going to say goodbye to them. And choose a government which says, yeah, eat your meat, eat your seafood. Do what you want. So yeah, that's not going to happen. There are ways in which governments can reduce reliance or dependence on animal protein. One is reduce subsidies. So in the European Union, the United States, China, Japan, Korea, governments pay support to farmers and fishermen. They might help pay for the feed, the grain which is used to feed cattle or sheep. They may pay money to fishermen to help them upgrade their technology, buy newer boats, buy newer fishing equipment, and so on. These subsidies are meant to keep people in jobs, and also, sometimes, not always, to keep the price of meat low. Government pays money to support farmers, fishermen, their product will be cheaper. That's the intention. So it seems like a good intention. It's to protect their jobs, also to protect traditional lifestyles, ways of life. So the European Union pays $67 billion US to farmers in the European Union. In China, Chinese government pays about $160 billion to farmers. The United States, about $30 billion. Countries like Japan, South Korea, China, and European Union pay a lot of money for fishery subsidies, together about 70% of the world total. Now, what's wrong with this? Two problems. One, it keeps production high. More farmers can stay in business with subsidies, so they will farm. And they'll farm cattle or other livestock, which they get money to support for. Fishermen, fishing fleets, they get paid money from the government. They get new boats, more powerful boats, they catch more fish. Yay! No. Not yet, not necessarily. Two, keep the food prices low. It's cheap. Cheap meat. Good news. We can all afford it. We can buy lots of it. Well, maybe not. Because together, this is increasing pressure on land and sea, on habitats, and also, yes, it is helping to contribute to climate change. So, the idea is that governments will reduce or cut subsidies to farmers and fishermen. Two effects. One is people will go out of business. Number of producers will fall. Two, prices will go up. No more cheap chicken, pork, beef. Prices will go up. Demand will fall. Meat, animal protein will become more expensive. Two, increased subsidies or other support for alternative low impact, low carbon footprint protein, sources of protein. Some of these are not vegetarian. One, laboratory grown meat. Now is it meat? Could I as a vegetarian eat it? To be honest with you, I think if I ate meat, even if it was laboratory grown meat, if I ate it, I'd probably throw up or get very sick. Maybe, I'm not sure, I have to think about it. Two, bug burgers. What's called micro livestock, which means very little farm animals, about this big usually, with more than 4 legs, which run around very fast. Now, true story, when this is a few years ago, I took a vegetarian holiday once, for 30 minutes, and I tried witchetty grubs. Witchetty grubs are big, fat, white worms, about this big. Traditional Australian Aboriginal bush food. So this big, grilled, and they tasted really good. High protein. Now you're all disgusted. How could you eat that? Oh, you're vegetarian. Actually, I recommend it if you're ever in Australia. So those bugs are low impact. You can farm lots of them in very small space. And they are very nutritious. High protein. Complete amino acids. Maybe vitamin B12, iron? Yes, I think so. Yeah, definitely calcium. So, subsidise alternate sources of protein, which are high quality. Also, yes, of course, meat replacement vegetarian food, which you can get in Japan and South Korea, but it is expensive. That makes me really annoyed. Okay, and lastly, education campaigns to encourage more vegetarianism and veganism. So the idea is in richer countries, especially, we get more people to become vegetarian and vegan. We explain that it's a good lifestyle, that you'll look good, you'll look attractive, maybe, if that's the thing. You'll be slim. That it has better health effects, and yes, that it is also good for the environment. And lastly, refuse to import fish or seafood products which come from criminal or pirate fisheries. Pirate fisheries being companies which are illegal, which fish in poor countries' seas or maritime zones or seas illegally, and sell their seafood or fish to countries like South Korea or Japan, pretending to be legal. Okay. Maybe not such an important issue for vegetarianism, but for those of you who are taking the negative side of this debate, you could propose this as an idea for, no, you don't have to be vegetarian, but here is this idea for reducing habitat loss in the oceans. Now, this all sounds really good, but there are some negative points we have to consider. So, let's say we try and encourage vegetarianism or veganism or even just very reduced animal protein consumption across the globe. The news is not all good. One, vulnerable people will suffer without animal protein. So a diet rich in animal protein, including milk, is very important for pregnant women. They need those nutrients. They need high quality protein. They need iron. They need vitamin B12 and so on. they don't get those things, the birth weight of babies is lower. Newborn babies from mothers who are not getting enough protein, nutrients, will be low. Those children will have a not very good life. They'll have greater risk of certain diseases. Their mental development will not be so high. They'll be short. Very short sometimes. Their bones will be weak, and so on. Also, children, especially young children, require high quality protein for critical physical and mental growth in their early years. So we've said that meat products, dairy products, contain high quality, easy to digest protein. It seems hard to replace them. Point number 2. So yeah, I'll just get back to the Sustainable Development Goal issue. If we are depriving or not giving young children and pregnant mothers enough high quality protein foods, then yes, some Sustainable Development Goals will be in danger. Number 2, zero hunger. Also improves health. Second point, actually sorry, I haven't put this down here. Second point is only the rich will be able to afford high quality animal protein foods. Drop subsidies or get rid of subsidies. Fewer farmers, fewer fishermen. Well, Mark Zuckerberg will still be able to enjoy a nice beef steak every night. Or maybe he uses a goat steak. I think there's some weird use about the other day about eating a goat. Anyway. So yeah, the rich people will be fine. Not so rich people, not fine. Low quality food, low quality protein. They will become involuntary vegetarians and vegans. Their nutrition will be poorer. Is that good? Well, that means some other Sustainable Development Goals might be in danger. So if we think of Sustainable Development Goals 1, 2, and 3, ending poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being. For some people, no, it may not be possible. If we drop subsidies on farming and fisheries, encourage more people to be vegetarian. Rich people, okay, poor people not. 3, drastic or rapid dietary change will damage human ways of life, employment, and habitats. So yeah, it sounds good. Take away those subsidies. Decrease the number of producers. On paper, yeah, that sounds fine. But these are people's jobs. Lots of people will lose their jobs. Fishermen, people in fisheries, people who help produce or process seafood and fish. Farmers, people who work in slaughterhouses, people who process, generate meat-based foods, they will lose their jobs. What's going to happen to them? Well, maybe in rich countries they can go onto welfare, in poor countries they can't. They're going to be in a lot of trouble. Not just that, but traditional ways of life will be wiped out. Traditional farming practices, traditional fisheries, gone. Ways of life that are hundreds or thousands of years old will disappear. And that's not just a problem for people. So these two photos here are from continental Africa. 60% of sub-Saharan Africa is dryland. And over thousands of years, these habitats have developed in interaction with herding, farming, low-impact farming of cattle and other livestock, like this. This is a photo from Kenya, traditional farmers. This is a very interesting photo from South Africa. A regeneration project on land which had turned to desert, almost become desert. The project involved putting cattle on that land. Not huge numbers of them, but kind of like herding them over quite wide spaces. it restored the habitat. It didn't destroy it, it brought it back. So some habitats are adapted to livestock animals. They're not destroyed by them, they're preserved by them. You take the cattle off, you reduce or eliminate that type of farming in those areas, well, yeah, people's jobs are going to go, their lifestyles are going to disappear. Also, that habitat is going to disappear. So it's not quite as simple as we thought. So in this case, Sustainable Development Goal 8, decent work and economic growth, could be badly damaged. And yes, also even life on land in some cases, such as in parts of Africa. Lastly, recommending a vegan or vegetarian diet is counterproductive or does not help us to achieve SDGs. This is another possible negative point. So according to the Eat Lancet project, the project for recommending we change our diets globally, it's still possible to eat some fish, some meat, just not very much. So we've seen that it will cause harm to many people's health and to many people's jobs and ways of life if everyone becomes vegan or vegetarian. But people could instead be flexitarian, which means vegetarian most of the time, but meat eaters sometimes. Just mostly decrease beef, which is the highest impact meat production type. But still eat some pork or some fish, some seafood, some cheese and so on. So really there's no need for everyone to become completely vegetarian or vegan to save the world. That's the negative point. Okay. So some things for you to think about when you're preparing for your debate. Well, I think one of the most important points is, well, how do we rank Sustainable Development Goals? How do we rank them? Because we seem to be trapped. If we say they're equal, it's not going to work. It doesn't seem like it's going to work. We can't get all of them. But if we say, oh, well, we might have to sacrifice some, which ones? We want zero hunger, zero poverty, really increased health. Well, we've got to increase food production and increase production of high quality foods, protein foods, high protein foods. Population increasing to 10 billion by 2050. We've got to get on that job. But if we do that, we also increase greenhouse gas emissions. We wipe out habitats on land and the sea, clearing land for farms, fishing out many species of fish and seafood, causing pollution from certain types of factory farming, and so on and so on. But if we say, oh no, really we have to protect Sustainable Development Goals such as reducing climate change, zero habitat or reducing habitat loss, sounds good. Maybe rich people will do okay in that situation. Poor people won't. Poor people will or could suffer. They will become more hungry, possibly. They will have less quality food if we encourage more vegetarianism, more veganism. Maybe they don't want to become vegan or vegetarian either. So we have a problem of inequality. Rich people will be okay, poor people won't be. But maybe we'll be protecting the environment and reducing global warming. Which is it going to be? So I hope I've given you some idea from both sides of the argument to help you prepare for a debate on this topic. And yeah, I guess that's probably about it. So, thank you.
anyone has them. Otherwise, we can take a short break and then we can do some case preparation. I have a question.
Yeah.
Because I'm wondering, when you said growing children need animal protein, I've read several things that say that's just a myth. It seems to me that's based on maybe a sort of false, what would be the right word? Well, anyway, false dichotomy, I guess, where your choices are either, let's say, a malnourished person like the Venezuelan woman who can't even produce breast milk because she doesn't have enough energy and protein in her body, right? But isn't that sort of a situation where her choices are either she has access to foreign aid, which is given in the form of milk powder, and maybe other kinds of animal protein, or else she doesn't have access to that. And in that case, of course, she needs that aid. But if she had access to, say, some beans, some tofu, some whole grain rice, and some walnuts or something, wouldn't that also be enough to make her able to produce the milk?
It's a big controversy at the moment in many countries. So in Italy, if I remember correctly, the Minister for Health wants to create a law that will punish vegetarian or vegan parents which don't feed their children enough animal protein, so the children could even be taken from them.
Wow.
Child abuse, you're not giving your children the right kind of food. And there have been cases where vegan parents have actually caused damage to children's health.
But isn't that more through ignorance? Like, if you
Yes.
have wealth and access to high quality vegan protein, can't that also do the job? That's
Problem
my
number
question.
2, if you're well educated and you're rich, it's easier to put your kids on a vegan diet because you know
Right.
what they need. You've studied it, you know what foods to combine, and you have the time.
Yeah.
Or perhaps you can hire a chef.
Right. So it's
Vegan
not an
chef.
absolute biological
No, it's not
necessity to
biological.
have
There's-
meat protein at any phase in your life. It's simply that having animal protein is a lot more compact, convenient, easy to deliver, and also matches the culture, so you don't need enough education to go
That's
beyond
it.
your cultural boundary.
Pretty much.
Okay.
And then the argument would be, someone's got to take one for the team, as
Right.
the Americans say. Why not rich people? Why not us?
Right.
We have the education or the means, we have the time. Perhaps if we're rich enough, we can hire a vegan chef. Oh, I can't
Just learn to cook yourself.
No, I do cook.
I'm just.
I have to, actually. But in poorer countries, they don't have those companies. They're much more vulnerable. So the argument could be, well, they are able to have the higher meat consumption.
Right. So it's not a false dichotomy in that environment. For that Venezuelan woman, it's either I get some milk or I go without any high quality protein.
In her
It's
case,
not,
it would be,
she can't go and buy some nuts and some whole grains.
yeah. I mean, it's not going to be on the market for a start.
Right.
So I think the biggest issue there is, what can we get to her which is compact,
Right.
easily digested, and has all the nutrients? Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah. Other guys, other people, questions or comments or anything.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Next. Oh, sorry. Yes, I
Which one of you?
Yeah. Next. Yeah. Yes. Sorry. Can you?
In agricultural farm, there more farm and farm that make out of the cattle's food is more than people's food. Making people.
You mean, so because the cattle eat a lot of food that humans could eat?
Yeah, wheat or corn.
Yes. That is another argument. I'll just see if I can go back to the slide. There's a couple of issues here. One is the subsidies actually pay quite a lot of money. So here we've got feed. So in the United States, about $77.3 billion in subsidies are paid to farmers so they can buy corn, wheat, and other stuff which they feed to their cows, and also soybeans. So yes, subsidies are covering this. It's a lot of money. And secondly, let's just go back to here. Now what is it? Energy, rice. Yeah, actually I'm not too sure about this rice. I'm not sure whether rice is being fed to animals in this case or what it means, but yeah. There are so many issues with that. One is, yes, this is food that humans can eat. It's being fed to cattle. And all of this food is being put into something that's quite inefficient. You feed lots of crops to cattle, and you get actually a very small amount of food from it. And lots of land is used up, both for the soybeans and other crops which are used to feed those animals, and also the land which those animals need to live on. And then we get quite a small amount of food out of it. And I mean, especially in wealthy countries, we don't even eat the whole animal. I mean, who eats tripe? Or some, I guess some people eat tripe. Yeah,
actually, in Asia, Asian wealthy countries, we do eat all that stuff.
You guys are, people in East Asia, like in South Korea or China, Japan, are not so wasteful.
We just ate mozzafiche last night.
Yeah. So that's probably better.
Yeah.
But Australians, Americans, New Zealanders, no way, they don't eat that stuff. It's horrible stuff. You don't eat it.
They feed it to other animals, right? Yeah. Domestic animals, maybe chicken feed also. Don't they feed chickens on anyway.
Yeah. So
it's not very efficient though.
Yeah, a lot of it goes to waste. Yeah. So yes, I think there is a lot of inefficiency. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that does imply that rice, maybe it's for a specific country where rice is a basis of feed for the animals. I'm not sure. It doesn't say what the context is there.
No, it doesn't.
It certainly appears that rice contributes 10% to the total CO2 emissions of agricultural production for animals, I would assume.
Yes, I assume so.
Because ruminant enteric fermentation, that's farting basically.
Farting, right? Yeah, that's something else. Sorry, next.
Yeah, how do you think about the farming, fishing, and which takes very small amount of fishes or some of the meats, and then by increasing those cells, you can gain more amount of
Do you mean laboratory grown? Sorry, farming. You mean fish farms?
Yeah, no. So. Yeah, not the way to grow fishes, but I mean just in some scientific way. So and some researchers are trying to introduce
to produce meat inside a laboratory, for example. So taking animal cells,
yeah,
and then creating a kind of cultivating those cells.
Yeah.
Yes, I mentioned that laboratory grown meat. Yeah, I think it's a very good idea. It's just very expensive. So how do we make it cheap? If we can make it cheap, I have no problem. I mean, I said before, I don't know if I could eat that. It's been a long time since I ate meat, so I think it probably made me sick. But yeah, for everyone else, I think it's a great idea, potentially. So yeah, in a debate situation, if you are against, you should become vegetarian. No, look, you can still eat meat, with just laboratory grown meat. Or if you're the pro-vegetarian vegan side, you say, well, actually, vegans can eat that too. It's not, an animal wasn't killed. So yeah, I think, it's a good idea. Yeah.
Back in Korea, I have 2 vegetarian friends, and I think like 3 out of 4 of them are vegetarians because they care about animal rights, rather than, more about animal rights. Do you have anything to mention about the rights of animals?
Yeah, I mean, didn't want to consider it here because it's not really a sustainable development goal, but you could say there are powerful arguments in favour of veganism especially, which come from not so much from the environmental side, but from the animal rights side. Particularly, there are a few reasons. One is pigs and some other livestock are highly intelligent animals. They can pass the mirror recognition test. They have very good problem-solving skills. Some people say probably the same level of cognitive or mental power as a 3-year-old child. It's very scary, isn't it? So yeah, from the animal welfare or animal rights perspective, I think there could be some very powerful arguments as well for giving up, even for going vegan. Because dairy and cheese, that does involve a lot of cruelty. Lots of baby calves get killed to make that production possible. So yeah, vegans are on pretty strong ground, I think, in the animal rights issue. I've been to South Korea once, and it was a little bit difficult. In fact, one day I had vegetarian bibimbap twice, because there was no other choice. I was really full, I was just bloated after. And actually I remember, yeah, I ordered breakfast in my hotel room, and it was late, so I sort of called them up and said, oh, sorry guys, I've got to get going soon. Can you bring my pancakes up? And they felt very sorry. So they brought my pancakes up with bacon. I thought, what the hell is this? How do you have bacon with pancakes? Now I thought, that's actually an American custom that Koreans have kind of absorbed or indigenized. But I'm not American. So I was like, what the hell? Bacon with pancakes? This is crazy. Yeah, so they were trying to do a good thing for me, but I was kind of shocked. Like, why?
So wait, what do Australians eat with pancakes then?
Syrup.
Only.
Yeah, syrup or fruit. Yeah, it's entirely a dessert type food, or even if it's breakfast food. Yeah, usually it's with sweet.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
I remember seeing a documentary. It was either an American channel or some British. They said that the CO2 emission is mostly from cows farting. So that was even more than gas emission from fossil fuels. So I was very surprised when I saw that documentary, and it was from a very famous channel. Have you ever remember coming across such?
Yeah, I mean here we've got ruminant enteric fermentation, and that just accounts for 35% of emissions. It seems terribly high.
35% of 13%.
Yeah. I don't think there's enough cows.
If you look at the left, non-agricultural energy production, 64% of CO2 emissions.
And 80% in the United States.
Yeah, and wherever this is taken from, it was 64, but 80% in the US.
Yeah, and 64% globally, about 80% in countries like the United States, where more people use cars or use aircraft transport. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that the worst, biggest issue is fossil fuels, and also that agriculture connects with that in many ways.
Yeah. But it's very interesting. You've read The Omnivore's Dilemma, I assume?
Yeah, I might have.
Might have. Oh, well, anyway, this book called The Omnivore's Dilemma, if you want to read about food policy, food production, food consumption as a cultural analysis, it's actually probably, I would say, well, it's a candidate for the best book I've ever read. Certainly, probably the best nonfiction book I've ever read. It's called The Omnivore's Dilemma by a guy named Michael Pollan. But he analyzes the way they, in factory farming, mass production, they feed cows, especially, as Shaun mentioned. Professor Odwyer, which do you prefer?
Oh, Shaun's good.
As Shaun said, cows are, like environmentally speaking, the most damaging type of meat production. But anyway, so to make cows grow faster and produce more meat, they feed them the highest calorie diet possible. But cows' biology, evolutionary biology, they're designed to eat grass, not high energy grains, but they feed them with corn and wheat and rice.
Yeah.
And so the problem is, it's sort of like when you overeat, right? You get very bloated, you fart a lot. And also they have to give them antibiotics just so that they don't get sick, which is a secondary problem, a whole other problem with the meat production. But anyway, like, so it's factory farming rather than like those, herders like raising the cattle like on this, sort of desert grassland, whatever, in the Maasai area, right? But it's the big factory farms where they keep the cows like just stuck in a very narrow place, and then they feed them a lot of like high energy food. That's that they produce like a lot of extra farting, essentially, and a lot of extra methane, greenhouse gases, and CO2. Like farts have CO2 as well. So
Yeah.
I think that chart with the circle was only CO2. It was like gigaton equivalent, or maybe it included methane. Is it gigaton equivalent of CO2 emissions is the little label underneath. But anyway, but it's still probably, it's not more than fossil fuel burning anyway.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah.
But yeah, that right-hand side, they don't fart as much because they're eating what they're designed to eat.
And on a traditional landscape and habitat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the shit, like in the traditional landscape, there are things that eat the shit. Like little bugs or mice or something, they eat that, they get extra nutrition, so it also doesn't create as much pollution by rotting or by, but in a big factory farm, like someone, shovels all the shit into, like, I don't know, someplace.
Lagoons. Well, in the case of pig farms in the United States, or industrial pig farms, they create special
Lagoons.
lakes.
Yeah.
Lakes full of
Yeah. Big lakes full of rotting shit, essentially, right? That produces more greenhouse gases. So
Yeah,
big, like,
absolutely.
industrial farming production is sort of, well, the center of the problem anyway.
and also intensive cattle farming.
Yeah.
Those type of stuff. Yeah.
So read that book, The Omnivore's Dilemma. Omnivore is like, what's omnivore in Korean? It's like not cheshik, not yukshik, but chopshik. Shik is like eating your food, right? Chop is like everything. In Japanese, there's probably something very similar because it's also based on the Chinese character. So like, you guys know? Okay, anyway, omnivore. Dilemma, problem, like, well, I can eat anything, so what should I eat? What kind of dietary culture and nutrition and so on is good? In that book, it talks about 4 different methods of production. It talks about like traditional farming, it talks about factory farming, it talks about hunting and gathering, and it talks about, what was the 4th one? Oh, fast food culture.
Which is a culture.
So yeah, so four types of meals, like a traditional, like sort of Western meal, like based on like what you would, like if you were a small farmer back in the 1800s, and then a meal from like, modern factory farming if you go to the grocery store and go shopping, a fast food meal if you go out to eat, and then like a meal you gather yourself through hunting and gathering. So, and Michael Pollan also, similar thesis to Shaun Odwyer. He says that, like, if I go and like hunt a wild pig out in the forest and kill it, and then like gather some mushrooms and, like have a little garden in my backyard and some vegetables and like, I don't mind eating that kind of meal. I think that's okay.
Yeah, so I had a question because recently I saw a video, or I read an article about a professor or a researcher who made an artificial meat made with his own feces.
With his own poop.
Yeah, and he actually made a video of him cooking it, and then he ate it, but then he was like, he extracted the protein from his own feces, and he like sanitized it and everything like that. And I thought it was disgusting, but also I thought it was a good idea because it has no like impact on man or the environment.
Self-sufficient.
Yeah, it was self-sufficient.
I mean, it's not to stop the poop. I mean,
as a vegetarian, do you think this method, or if this becomes commercialized, it can be replaced by, it can replace the current meat industry?
It's
It's like really good, so.
conceivable. I think there's going to be a lot of marketing going on. A lot of very, very positive marketing. Let's say the message should not be eat, shit and die. It should be eat, shit and live. Or eat recycled shit, yeah. I think it, yeah, I mean, it's a grand idea. And I mean, it would be a perfect society.
There's the problem with conservation
We can
of energy.
recycle bodily products, as food products. Yeah, I'd certainly like to see more about that. Yeah, but yeah, there is the ew factor. I mean, talking about insect protein is enough. I mean, most people are like, no way am I eating bugs. Oh, but your grandpa did. I don't care. Yeah, so of course that's sort of next level ew factor that's there. Yeah, but yeah, that's really interesting. I'm going to check that out. I'm not going to try it. I'm going to check it out. Yes.
So I recently read several articles about vegan production. So it's actually, if you industrialize vegan food production, it actually could do potential harm to the environment.
That's entirely possible.
In the way that the farming is still going on, the deforestation is still going on, and the fertilizers that we use to produce vegetables also potentially will pollute the environment. So I just feel a bit confused that if really being a vegetarian can more effectively contributing to reduce the global warming and reducing the animal diversity loss. So
yeah.
it's a bit confusing.
I mean, I've tried to put the argument flexibly so it's easy to defend. Not everyone, just the richest. Us, that means, should either drastically reduce or eliminate meat from our diets, or fish and seafood. And yes, maybe divert, what's the word? Transfer certain types of foods which are produced now for cattle. Transfer that production to humans. So in fact, we are cultivating a lot of crops and cereals, but we're feeding them to animals, which we eat. That's not very efficient, really, because we can eat. So then we just say, well, take the animals out. We just don't eat so much beef.
Yeah.
And then those crops, we still grow them, but we eat them instead. Perhaps we don't even have to grow so many.
So what I'm thinking is instead of eliminating either side of it, maybe we can find a point that we can keep the balance of
That's
both
entirely
sides.
possible. Look, I mean, here in places like sub-Saharan Africa, it's going to be a bad idea to take out livestock farming or herding. We should leave it. That should be left alone. Just let people to do that and raise their meat for themselves. They're not going to eat very much. It's going to be low impact. But us, well, that's a different story. So instead of taking from the poor, take their food from them, even if it's meat, we say no, take from the rich. That means us. I'm not talking about the top 1%. I'm talking about the top 10%, the upper middle class, the university graduates and students, and people in professional jobs like professors, so on and so on. That's all of us. Should. On this argument, anyway, I'm not saying, this is my opinion, you must agree and solve this debate. I'm just saying that's a possible argument that can address your question. Is that satisfying? Are you less confused? I mean, it is confusing because we are trying to balance some very different goals, and it might be that they just can't match very well. We might have to accept that some values just do not match with each other. We can't compare them very well. We can't say one's more important than the other. Maybe that's what life is like.
Yeah.
did you have any specific reason to become a vegan or vegetarian?
I want to be a vegan.
Vegan, absolutely.
But in this country, I will die if I become vegan. There's just not enough. I mean, if I had maybe twice the salary I'm currently earn, and I could source vegan foods from overseas or here, yes.
Okay, so do you have any specific reason to become
Vegetarian.
Yeah.
Right. To make a long story short, I lived on a farm when I was a kid in New Zealand, a hobby farm. And 2 times a friend of my father's came over and killed some sheep, and I watched. And just at that time I watched a documentary on TV about hippies in America, kind of different lifestyle people who live outside cities, are vegetarian. Become a vegetarian. And my parents, this was very conservative in country town New Zealand, they said, the hell you are. You're not becoming vegetarian. So yes, it took a while. It took till I was 16. Then I got a part-time job, 17 I think. Then I became a vegetarian. Had my own money, taught myself to cook. Yeah, so that's the reason. Yeah.
So do you think we can increase the rate of like people become vegetarian by hitting on the sympathy, like showing videos of cruelly killed animals, like in your case, right?
Yeah. I watched one the other day, and I regretted it. It was like 30 seconds, and I just stop. But in that case, it was abuse. It was a pig slaughterhouse, and there's some kind of new rules in the United States where they're going to speed up the production. And that means people are going to become careless, not follow the rules. Pigs will still be awake and kicking when they stab them in the throat, which is what I saw. Those videos can have different effects. Sometimes people are horrified, but other times they might just get angry and say, I don't want to see this, I'm going to keep eating my bacon. So I think people have to be very careful with those shock videos. They can actually cause a strong reaction and make people think, damn it, I'm going to eat my pork. Really, that's what can happen. So yeah, I think people want to encourage vegetarian or vegan lifestyles, they have to be very careful about the shock messaging and try different kinds of methods, including, well, it's healthier for you. And you're going to have maybe a longer life or that kind of thing. Yeah. And yes, also, yeah, it's going to help deal with global warming and habitat loss.
One more thing is on the side of people eating meat. So the thing that from the early stage of the earth until the right before the society of the human form, then the thing the habitat and the biodiversity also already decreased. So that technically means that the earth is decaying. So the human society is just maybe a factor to speed up the decaying process. So basically, that the Earth will happen this way anyway. So we just need to keeping the pace to not going too fast, but we don't need to change anything. Do you think that's correct?
Well, yes, there have been boom and bust cycles, haven't there? From the Permian mass extinction, 95% of terrestrial or land life was destroyed, wiped out. So we only had a few species sort of keeping life on land going between the sort of Permian to Triassic transition period. So yeah, I mean, if you look at long term, you do see a kind of boom and bust cycle, up and down, from various factors. I mean, comet strikes, mass volcanic eruptions, and so on, which cause increases in global temperature or decreases. So yeah, if you look at it from that angle, yes, we're contributing to it. And perhaps that's natural. We are a part of nature. So you take that as a kind of descriptive point. This is what we're doing, and yes, we are a part of nature, and yes, in nature this has happened in the past. But if you think about it, well, we are also reasoning animals, and we are also animals who have an idea of what is right and what is wrong. If we think about that as well, and then we think, if we see it as a wrong thing to decrease biodiversity because one, it's bad for life on Earth for us to be doing this, because we know we shouldn't do it, and two, we could wipe ourselves out pretty quickly, and it's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be very, very nasty for us eventually. It is getting nasty. If I can speak from personal experience, the first time I really thought about this seriously was last year. I mean, before that I knew about it, but I've never really sort of personally felt, damn it, we're in trouble. In August of last year I was a volunteer. I'm a member of a volunteer organisation. And I went to Kude in Hiroshima, where there were heavy landslides, Dosha, last year, July. In a small countryside district, maybe 50 people, or maybe I think 80 people were killed. Lots of homes destroyed by landslides, connected to extreme weather. Now, I'm not saying global warming caused that, but global climate change is increasing extreme weather, such as really high rainfall, makes disasters like that possible. And I was looking at these homes wiped out or buried, thinking about the people killed in them. Most of them were old people, couldn't run away, didn't evacuate maybe because they thought it was too much trouble. They were killed. It wasn't a very nice way to die either. So yeah, that's them. It could happen to us eventually. We could die very, very badly. Not immediately, but over a long-term period. So yeah, when I think about this, I mean, it's not just, well, that, it's also what kind of world are you? I'm going to die pretty soon. You're not. And then your children, what kind of world are they going to inherit? So then it's not just a descriptive thing, it's also we're reasoning creatures. We can think about this. Is this right? Can we change it? Maybe we can't. As you say, maybe it's too late. Maybe we can do our best to manage the decline. But that still means we have to do stuff like possibly we have to do stuff like this. Man, it was hard work. I lost 2 kilograms in 1 week. Yes.
You say different people have different lifestyles, and different people have lifestyle not vegan. That is okay. And on the other hand, in the beginning of this lecture, you said you expect more people to be vegan.
Yes.
So I feel kind of contradiction there. So could you explain more detail about
deliberate.
your lifestyle or your stance?
So I said more, and I'm leaving that open for everyone to decide. Is more too much? It's not possible. Or does more just mean us, the top 10%? Not just Mark Zuckerberg. It's easy to hate on the top 1%. Not so easy to hate on ourselves, who think that we're not so rich, that our lifestyles are nice and decent and moral, but actually, when you look closely, maybe they're not. That's the more difficult issue. So, yes, I'm leaving that open to be criticised or supported. I'm not going to say 100%, I'm vegetarian, so I'm going to push this line. No, it's more complicated. So yeah, I want that contradiction to sort of stay there and not to be absolutely clear.
So do you feel any kind of moral obligation to spread vegan, not using by like the graphic image, but using the statistics or this kind of lecture? Do you think?
Well, yes. I mean, not necessarily here. But I'm not an evangelist. I'm not good at it. Maybe I can try by example. I mean, my daughter's 7 years old, nearly 8. She wanted to be vegetarian at one stage. but I think she likes Hamburg too much. So now she's not vegetarian. But if I say to her, oh look, it's a really good idea for you to become vegetarian, I mean, what does that mean for me as a father? I'm sort of trying to push my values onto my own daughter. I don't really want to do that. I really want her to choose. Probably when she's older, when she's about 12 or 13, she'll think, oh, Daddy's so uncool, he's a vegetarian, I don't want to be like him. Yeah, so I mean, I think in some ways you're trying to model the lifestyle, trying to say, yes, it's practical. Oh, you vegetarians are weak, you can't live like this. Excuse me, mate, I can bench press 100 kilograms. Don't bullshit me. I can say that, I will. So yeah, there's that side of the personal side. But trying to push it, that's just my personality, I can't do it.
And one of the purpose of this lecture is spread veganism for us. Do you expect us, one of us, to be vegan or veganism?
Well, I mean, the subtext is there, and people can draw from that. Yes, we ought to, but I mean, I guess because I'm trained as a philosopher, I'm not really an activist, and I'm not very good at joining tribes either. Sort of the vegan or vegetarian tribe versus the rest. I'm not very good at that. I do prefer to sort of encourage different points of view, but also perhaps hint, as I think I have, that, well, I'm vegetarian, of course, and yes, I would be happy for quite a few reasons if more people became vegetarian. In food World Cup, for example, my life would become easier if more people became vegetarian. So yeah, that's my message, I guess.
You also said using the shocking image is not a good idea to spread or introduce vegan for someone else. So, well, what do you think? You said you became vegan because of one of the shocking documentary or why do you think it is not a good idea?
Well, I mean, I was a very rare case. Many children in my country town were exposed to that and did not want to become a vegetarian or vegan. It was just part of life. It was just me. Perhaps I was a bit sensitive, and I reacted like that. And perhaps I was lucky that I saw a documentary which explained the vegetarian lifestyle. So yeah, I think using shock tactics doesn't always work. People are going to switch off, like I did. Stop the video. I'm not watching this. Or two, they're going to be very defensive and get angry and go tribal. Damn it, this is my big tribe, this is my meat-eating tribe, I will defend its values, don't show me that stuff, it's probably fake news anyway. So yeah, I think there's a real limit on using those kinds of tactics. Yes, sometimes. If there's a legal activity going on, and this, for example, video is shown to inform people, look, this is not right, it's illegal, and we should stop it. Yes, in that case, you might appeal to meat eaters. They might think, I want to eat meat, but not meat that comes like that. That's possible. But as a message for vegan or vegetarian lifestyles, I think it's a bit tricky. Human psychology is very difficult. Yeah.
It might be related to the Koda's previous question. There is a medical and health aspect, and we can easily guess the eating animal meat may increase the risk of cancer and specific diseases. And I think the health approach is a more convincing approach to the defensive people.
I agree. Bacon. Bacon, it does sound very bad. For lovers of bacon, the news is not good. Cancer, also the high salt content due to blood pressure and so on. And it turns out that there are very, very tasty vegetarian bacon alternatives, meat substitute bacon. So yeah, I think in some cases, it's just clear. It's like smoking cigarettes almost. It's almost that bad. There's some types of meat. Beef and others, well, I think it's more you just shouldn't eat too much. Yes, I think it's a kind of it depends in some ways. Definitely having a high meat diet, more than you need. It's having a high soy diet is also not so good for your health either, for that matter, if you're vegetarian. That's one of my problems living in food World Cup. What am I going to get for my protein? Tofu? eating that every day is not necessarily a good thing. Not as bad as eating bacon, for sure. But yeah, it's not the best thing to rely on. Yeah.
Oh, so I just simply think people prefer meat over vegetable just because it tastes good. So why don't you think the government should, invest on the education or the way to deliver how to make vegetable tastier so people can follow it, right? So right now the media's maybe it's a little bit late for the earlier generation, but for us young people, they quite fancy the like culinary media, just like Gordon Ramsay. On Facebook they have a tasty in different countries, like tasty Japan, tasty Korea. So why don't we just invest on them and they will deliver the message. They will know how to make a home cooked like tastier vegetable over meat.
Yeah.
So we are not aiming for the whole society, right? We're aiming for the majority and the potential citizens. So we just orient them in that way. So
Yeah.
when the consumers trend or direction change, so it will automatically change the supply, right? So
Yes,
what do you
I
think
agree.
the government should do?
I mean, I think you could, like celebrity chefs, for example, could promote, but not too politically, because I said we are tribal. And if you push that too hard, people are going to push back and say, no way, are you forcing me to give up my meat? So it has to be a fairly subtle kind of message. Like, okay, why don't you just try this some days a week and see what it tastes like? Tastes good, doesn't it? Yeah. tastes just as good as meat, doesn't it? Yeah. Now, this was last year, going back to Tokyo, where I used to live, and some ex-students took me out for dinner to a vegan restaurant, and it was top class. It was like haute cuisine. It was expensive, and it tasted really good. And I don't know why, but I felt ashamed. It was like vegetarian food should not taste this good. It should not be so fancy. But it is entirely possible to make really good quality, high class vegetarian food, which rich people will like. Really we need to get rich people to eat it. They're the ones who use up the most resources and produce the most greenhouse gases. So yeah, I completely agree with you.
So, Kota, what's our schedule? We have to get to lunch by what time today?
Yeah, this is just in time, so we should have a few minutes break and you start
And a
the
quick
case
wrap
learning related to this lecture.
Okay. I think this is good.
Yeah.
Thank you.